voice boomed out of the fog, "Do you know where you are?" My mind raced, and all I could come up with was hell. And the voice boomed back with this maniacal laugh, and I took off.
Today we have M.K. McDaniel on the show. She goes by Kathy. Kathy, I heard you had a near-death experience. Let's hear about it.
I certainly did. This was about 23 years ago. I had gotten a phone call from my best friend who had found out he had leukemia and he had to go to Seattle to a research hospital and needed two caregivers. So he asked if I could go, and I said sure. So I was the one that went up to Seattle, found us a place near the hospital. He and the other caregiver came, and it was supposed to take 2 or 3 months, and things went sideways. So after about 8 or 9 months, after, oh my gosh, all kinds of ups and downs and hopes and despair, he passed away. And he was only 53, and it was devastating. I was physically, emotionally, and spiritually shot. So when a very virulent flu came into the area, I caught it, and by the time I got down to one of the dock in the boxes, a friend had driven me down there. They couldn't find a pulse, so they threw me in an ambulance. Went to a hospital. I'd gone into pneumonia, and very quickly went into ARDS, which is acute respiratory distress syndrome, which is also known as lung failure. That's usually what kills people when they've got COVID and stuff. So the doctor said that I had a 38% chance of making it. They were going to suggest putting me into a drug-induced coma so they could throw the medical book at me, and the family and I had agreed I really had no choice. The last words he said to me is that I'm giving you some amnesia drug that will put you out, and you will be unable to remember anything that happens to you. You know, your brain's going to be offline. You'll just kind of go into a deep sleep. So I did, but I woke up. And I was in complete darkness. There was no sound. I had no idea where I was. I wasn't scared. I just thought I was just kind of confused and kind of hung out. And then eventually, this kind of a reddish glow started happening. And I figured, oh, well, maybe the sun's coming up. I'll be able to see where I am. But it didn't get too much lighter, and there was a swirling fog that was now encompassing the area. And it was getting too warm. It smelled awful. And then I started hearing these shriekings and screaming in the background. I thought to myself, this can't be good. And as I thought that, this voice boomed out of the fog, "Do you know where you are?" My mind raced, and all I could come up with was hell. And the voice boomed back with this maniacal laugh, and I took off, running, turned left, and took off into the darkness. As I ran, I stopped, and then all of a sudden, these bright lights came up, and I found myself in this like bombed out city. It was like New York or someplace, because there was incredibly tall buildings, and a lot of them had started to fall, or the windows were blown out. There was big chunks of rebar and concrete, and screaming and fires. And I thought, holy cow, where am I? And I tried to duck back into find some shelter. And while I was there, weird things were happening. I heard this like metal scraping and scuttling as a big shadow went by. And I thought, well, shoot, maybe it's aliens. And then this group of people that looked like, I don't know, some sort of survivors in rags kind of came out of the darkness and peered at me. And I did not feel safe. And I thought, you know what, maybe I can go find it inside a building or something. And I started running. I tried to crawl my way up over kind of a concrete fence, and I fell backwards. And I thought, oh, geez, this is going to hurt. And the lights went out. And the lights came. And I found myself in another place. I was staring at something large, but it appeared to be some sort of hairy person. And when I looked up, it was very obviously, in my mind, a demon. And the demon stood there, and I thought, again, good grief, what's going on? And he just said, "Do you want to get out of here?" And I thought, gosh, that demon speaks perfect English. And I said, "Yes, I do." And he says, "I got a job for you. You get that done, and I will personally see that you get out." And I thought, well, this is all very weird, but I want out of whatever this situation is. He waves his arm, and up comes this scenery of an immense field of blackberry vines. They were all intertwined and probably, I don't know, 6, 10 feet tall. And I looked at that, and being from Washington, I knew how difficult those things are to cut down and get rid of. I'd had him on some of my properties before, and I kind of looked at him, and he says, "You just need to cut all that down, and I'll make sure you get out." And I thought, that's going to take a long time. And then he hands me these little paper cutting scissors that they give children, and then belly laugh. And I thought, he's toying with me. Whoever this guy is, he's a jerk. So I swapped the scissors out of his hands, and I crouched down and started gnawing away at one of the canes, which was very thick. Finally got it cut. Went to put it behind me, turned back around, and the thing grew back. The demon thought that was hilarious, and I didn't. And so I thought, he says, "Just give up. You're never getting out of here. You're going to despair. Just do it now. Save yourself the trouble." And I says, "No, I'm not. I'm getting out of here." So I leaned back down to keep cutting. The lights went out. The lights came up. Now I'm in a totally different situation. Looks like I'm in a hospital. And I thought, well, this is weird. It had white floors, white walls, white ceiling, lots of light. There were doors on either side of me. And I thought, doors is good. But when I looked up, oh no, there's another one of those demon things at the end of the hall. They all seem to carry a truncheon or a stick or something to be menacing. And I thought, quick, I got to pick a door. So I'm looking both left and right. And when I looked around, this guy was fast, man. He was right in front of me. And I just stopped, didn't want to aggravate him. I wanted to see what he wanted to say. And he says, "Okay, you got a new job." And I thought, great. And he says, "You're going to go in that room over there. You're going to take what they give you, and you're going to come across the hall in front of me and into the door on the left and put the object down." And I thought, okay, I'm going to get out of his sight by going into this other room. Maybe there's another door. Maybe there's a person in there that can help me out. I said, sure, I'll play along. So I go into this other room, and it's quite large, and it's got a lot of gurneys in it. There's a person sitting in front of each of the gurneys on a stool, and I thought, oh, this is a doctor's office or an operating room or something. I wonder what they're doing. And so one of the doctors raised his hand, and it was all bloody and stuff, and I just stared, and he turned around and says, "Get over here." I thought, oh, job. So I went over, and he said, "Well, put your arms out." And so I did, and he had taken something from a woman laying on this gurney, and it was all bloody and awful, and he scooped it up and slopped it into my arms and says, "Get going." I thought, oh, as I looked down, I thought, oh, Lord, I know what this is. And I went into the hall, and the demon just pointed to the other side. So I was in shock. I went over to the other side, and when I went into this other room, my God, it was as big as a Costco. It was huge, and it had all these piles and piles of what I was carrying in my arms. And so I was horrified, and I put the poor thing down on the floor, went back into the middle of the hallway, and the demon says, back you go. This is your job." And I says, "No, I'm not going to do that. That's disgusting. It's awful. It's immoral. I'm not going to do it." And he says, "Oh, jeez, you have no idea what you're bringing on yourself now." And he raised that club like he was going to hit me. I closed my eyes, and the lights went out. My eyes when the lights came back on. This went on many times. Between times, a lot of times I found myself on the road, which was just something when the lights came up, it wasn't as bright. And all I could see was maybe 3 or 4 feet of what looked like a dirt road. And it went to the left and it went to the right. And I couldn't see anything. The horizon just had that eternal glow, like a forest fire was coming your way or something. No
Mm.
stars, no moon, just this dusk and the road. Occasionally I thought, well, I'll take a right, and like I'm in traffic and get on the road and see where it goes. Maybe it'll get me out of here. There was a pile of rocks here, there was a hole there, but it was very boring. The thing about being on the other side is there's no time. There's no watch, there's no way to measure how long you're there. It just is always now. But I felt like I was on that road for a very long time. At one point, I thought, geez, I think this thing's a treadmill, just a great big treadmill. No matter how far I walk on it, I don't get anywhere.
Mm.
But then, boom, the lights would go out and the lights would come up. On the road, I did happen to meet some living people. I understand that it's very rare for people that have a near death experience to see living people. There's a lady called Emily that's doing a book on that now. But one time I was on the road, and I know I never felt like I was dead. I just always felt it was me because I was hungry and I was tired and I was thirsty and I was scared. And walking on this road, all of a sudden I smelled something really good. And I thought, oh my gosh, what can that be? And I kind of picked up my pace. And as I got down there, I noticed that it was strange. There's nothing anywhere, but there's a guy sitting on the left in a chair. And then on the right, there's this woman bustling about with all these tables that they were piled high with food and delicacies, like for a really special wedding banquet or something. And when I looked at the lady that was putting all this together, I thought, oh my gosh, that's a relative of mine, a very close one. We're very good friends. And I thought, what luck. Again, I was getting used to the fact that this was my new reality. And I said to her, I said her name and she looked at me, but she looked confused. And I thought, well, that's strange. And I said, excuse me, I realize you're very busy here, but if you could just fix me a small plate of anything and a glass of water, I'll get out of your way. And she just looked at me and said, well, this is for the important people. And I thought, zing, that hurt. And I said, sorry to bother you, and got back on the road. A pretty unpleasant thing happened on the road. I was walking along and pretty much happy to be on the road because every time I came to another segment, it was worse than the one before. I felt a little safer there. But this time when I looked up and it was hard to see, there was a bunch of people milling around. Unfortunately, they kept walking back and forth across my road, and they were limping and muttering to themselves. They were in rags. And as I got closer, I kind of slowed down and thought, those aren't healthy people and they look dangerous. But I was afraid to get off the road because I didn't know where I would be. So I thought, well, okay, I'll just slow my gait. I'll look down. I'll mutter a little bit. I'll start limping and maybe they won't notice that I'm not one of them. So I got about to the middle of the group and they all froze. So I stopped and I waited. And the women that you could only tell their faces were kind of covered with shawls. All they had like skirts, but they were all raggedy, and they moved farther out of the where we were, and the men moved closer in. And I thought, oh gosh, this is not going to be good. And one came up and smacked me in the chest, knocked me backwards on the ground. Another came up and kicked me. And then they jumped on me and do what gangs of unruly men do to innocent and uh, women that aren't protected. And that was a terrible experience. It went on, and then finally they started backing off, and one leaned over and got his face right into mine, and his breath was fetid, and he said, "We all have AIDS, and now you do too, and you can't die. You'll just get sicker and worse, and you'll become like us." And a big chunk of his cheek fell off. And I thought, oh my gosh. And then he backed up. And I just sat there not knowing what to do. And then this demon woman came up and they kind of backed up. And she said, come with me. You're one of us now. And I said, nothing. I just got my rags together and I stood up and I followed her. And as I did, a rest of, oh, probably about 10 or 12 other women in my condition, we all got in a line. And when we got to the tree line, I remember that when we broke out, as far as I could see, was like snow covered ground, like a tundra. And the wind was blowing and it was snowing. And here we had rags. And so she said, get in a single file. And we followed her. And again, with no time, I couldn't judge how long we walked through that freezing snow. But by the time we got where we were going, I did some sort of out of body thing where I came up like a drone and looked down and saw us walking in this long trail, and the snow was up to our chests. And there
Wow.
was just I could see the trail where we had come going into the distance. And then I came back in, and then she finally came to this ratty looking shack and said, all right, everybody inside. And we thought, oh, thank goodness, at least we'll get out of the storm and we'll be able to huddle together and maybe get a little warmth going on. And we all huddled in and thought, oh my gosh, there was no insulations. The windows didn't have glass in them. And we were freezing sitting on that floor. And then she says, okay, now we wait for customers. And we looked at each other and thought, I thought, how much worse can this get? What is going on? Where am I? How am I going to get out of here? And, I said to her, I've been here a long time. I've been through a lot. Why does it seem particularly depressing right now? Am I just getting tired? And she says, oh no, it's Christmas on Earth. That's always the worst day in hell. I thought, hell? That can't be. I mean, if, I was just frazzled and I thought I got angry. And I just said, Christmas, huh? And I started singing a Christmas carol. I love Away in a Manger. I thought that'll tick her off. So I started Away in a Manger. And she turned around and she said, shut up. And a couple of the other ladies got a smile on their face. And we said, no crib for his bed. She said, I mean it. You're going to be sorry. And then we said, the little Lord. And she shrieked and jumped at me. And I closed my eyes. And I opened my eyes as this bright light came up. But this time it was blissful. It was joyful. It was full of love. It was an incredible feeling that you don't ever feel on earth. If everything, the best things that ever happened to you were all rolled into one, they would pale by comparison. So I was enjoying this absolute wondrous love, and I'd forgotten everything that had happened before. And as the light kind of, it wasn't a harsh light, it was a warm light, and as it kind of dimmed a little bit, it took shape and it looked almost like cathedral or something, but there was no pictures or anything. It was just like white marble. And as I looked up, I thought, oh my goodness, that's my friend that died last month. And he had had leukemia then. He had, lost his hair and he was all blotchy and everything. And he looked great. He looked wonderful. He looked younger. He looked about 35. And I thought, huh, that's funny. And he's laughing. And I thought, oh, he doesn't know he's dead. I'm not going to be the one to tell him. And then he really laughed. And I thought, I didn't say that out loud. Something's going on here. And I thought, well, if he's dead and I'm with him, this has got to be the greatest news ever. I'm dead too. I'm in heaven with my best friend. And I says, why are we just standing here? And then out of the corner of my eye, I turned to see this great big, like, architect's table with a huge book on it, and it was open halfway. And I thought, he was showing me something in that book, but I can't remember what it was. Oh, well. And I said, come on, let's go. Let's go see the stuff. And he walked over slowly and he just says, "Now, Mary Kay, you've got too much left to do." Slap. I said, "What? They're sending me back?" No. I just crossed my arms and I said, "No." I stamped my foot. I was furious. And he just smiled and it got black. And then the lights came and they were too bright. And oh no, there's figures milling around at the bottom of wherever I was. I couldn't move. I couldn't talk. And one person turned around. I thought, oh my God, I'm back in hell again. And I said, "Mom's back." And they're looking at me. And I thought, I think that's my family. My daughter came and sat down and says, "Oh, Mom, you were so sick. We thought we lost you, but you're back." And my mom says, "Oh, we sent a prayer circle around the world and we brought you back." And I thought, oh, if I could get my hands around you, I would shake you silly. I don't want to be here, but I couldn't say anything. That was a blessing. I would have been rude. So I was back. And I'm thinking, you've got too much left to do. And I can't move. I can't breathe. I can't talk. I weighed 86 pounds. I had no muscle mass left. That's why I couldn't move. And it was going to be, I'd been 3 weeks in the ICU. I had another week there. And then they were able to get me to a physical rehabilitation hospital for a month so I could learn how to do crawling, walking, going up and down steps, swallowing, all the things I had forgotten. I was like an infant learning everything over again. It was very depressing. Thank God I had my family around me. I had been dating someone, and he asked me to marry him in the hospital because the doctor said, "There I am, 53 years old. You can go live with your parents or you can go to a convalescent hospital. Those are your choices." And he said, "She's not going to either one of them, and then asked me to marry him." And I said, "Sure, get me out of here." Yeah. So he's a very kind man. He moved me into his home. And as I started my long recovery, it took at least a year before I could do most of the things I'd done before. But this haunting was still happening. I was afraid to go to sleep. I was afraid the demons would come back. I didn't understand how I got there in the first place. The only thing I could come up with is that I'd been raised Catholic and I was always taught from day one, only very, very, very good saints go straight to heaven. The rest of us go to purgatory. Purgatory is like hell, except you get out. They even had, things you could do to prepare for your purgatory. You could say extra prayers, and then you would get a certain number of days off your purgatory sentence. If you said a rosary, you got 300 days off if you went to extra mass. I mean, I did a lot of that stuff, and I thought it was all math. I must have screwed up somewhere. I didn't say enough prayers to offset, the things that I did that were wrong. And that's what happened. It took a long time for me to get the courage to say to people, because they thought I didn't, the doctor said I couldn't remember anything that happened. And then when I started saying, well, yeah, I kind of had this bad experience. Oh my gosh. And my mom came up with, well, Kathy, what did you do to go to hell? What have you done that we don't know? So now all the shame is put on me because there's no good answer to that. Right. I just clammed up. And it took about 10 years and a series of synchronicities before I found the group called IONS. It's the International Association of Near-Death Studies. The voice, which you hear when you come back, which you generally hear as your conscience, occasionally before you have a near-death experience, is now very loud, very insistent, and kept insisting that I would go to an IONS meeting in Seattle, and I finally did go. I went to several and I listened to speakers, and I could get that part about them being in heaven, but they were in heaven the whole time. And nobody had had the hell experience. So I thought something's wrong with me. I don't belong here. The voice said, yeah, you do. And I had to come back again. finally one of the leaders said, "You keep sneaking out of these meetings. What's going on?" I said, I didn't have that happen like that. And he says, "There's about 3 in 10 people have a hellish, disturbing experience. They don't like to talk about it. We need you to tell your story." Well, it took me about a year before I got the guts to get him up in front of all these people and tell my entire tale. And I thought, well, I'll get through with it and they'll show me the door. They'll say, "You don't here." But at the end, I'm a storyteller. So I got going and we were walking through hell, and you could have heard a pin drop in that room. Their eyes are all googly, watching this whole thing. They're with me. And at the end, when we get out, there was actually clapping. Yay, we got out, we got out. And I said, I've got to tell you something. Um, After 10 years, and it took another 10 years to finalize my line of thought, is that I was taught my whole life I would go here to this place. The rest of you, I'll go up and are immediately shuffled into heaven. You get a life review. I wasn't there long enough to get one. You get to see your entire life, start to finish, and then they flip this film around, and then you get to experience how that was to interact with you. And you get to feel, the pain when you've been nasty to somebody, the joy when you've been kind to someone. There's no judgment. It's just a realization that because you planned your life. I've learned that we all start off in heaven. We plan the challenges, the things we want to learn. I want to learn to be empathetic. I want to learn whatever it is. We plan our lives around that to have experiences that will allow us that. And then it's earth school. And when we die, we go home. We get the life review. We get to see how we did. But nobody's punished. There's no God there. There's no St. Peter there to condemn anyone. So I needed to tell people I manifested that experience. You can do that if your family and your culture and your religion teach you something. It gets so ingrained and you so believe it, you can manifest that. So my advice is to skip the trip, to come to the conclusion, like I did, any way you can, that God is all loving, all forgiving, would never condemn anybody. Sometime after I had been back and I was processing all of this, I prayed. I said, "Please, I'm so tired of the thou shalt nots. Give me something easy I can do every day to keep on track and remember what my goal is." And the words came two at a time because I had trouble remembering things after all the drugs they gave me. And God said to be loving and kind, merciful, forgiving, encouraging, grateful, non-judgmental, and useful. And the useful for me was the hardest one to say, well, what does that mean? But it means find your purpose. You planned a purpose to come down here. And once you find it, it's wonderful. My purpose is to spread this message. And again, that was the you've got too much left to do. That was 23 years ago. And for the longest time, I thought, well, okay, they made me write a book. The voice keeps saying you got to write a memoir about this and get it out to people. That's when COVID hit, 3 years ago. And then it's like, how is this woman in Gig Harbor, Washington, to get this message out? And then I got an email from a podcaster in New Zealand that says, "I heard about your story. Would you be on my program?" I didn't know what a podcast was. I thought I was going to have to go to New Zealand. And she says, "No, no, no. There's a thing called Zoom. It's really good." So I've done over 113 of these podcasts in the last 3 years. I figured that ahead of time, I guess, and manifested that. I've just been told that I've got over 1 million views, laying in that hospital bed. I could never imagine reaching 1 million people. But it's just trust in the process, trust in yourself, and it's all going to be good.
I love that you mentioned that about because people always leave in the comments, why did so and so write a book? I can't believe them because they wrote a book. But you said you needed to write a book, otherwise you never would have been on a podcast. And then people think people that write books get rich. So what do you have to say about
no, oh no, oh no. I had recently sold my house, so I had a little cash and I put aside a large amount of money to publish my book. I had no idea how much it would cost. I'll just say it, $25,000. And so I am now down to $2,000. That's with all my income and my expenses. I have I've spent $23,000. So no, this is not done to make money. Period.
So there will also be people that leave comments that say, oh, it was a dream, or it was you were on drugs and you were hallucinating it. What do you say to those people?
The doctor made it very clear that I could not remember anything. My brain was offline. There's very many, many, many NDEers that have had like brain bleeds. They've had, I mean, they were dead for 30 minutes and they remember everything. That's because it takes place in your soul. This does not occur in your brain. And that's why you can't forget it. A dream, I'm pretty sure I dreamt last night, it's gone. I mean, how many times do you have a dream that's so real when you wake up in the morning and you can't remember it? You have to write it down. This has been 23 years. It's all still here
Yeah. And
in
then
my soul, not in my brain.
and
I forget where I forgot my mother's name the other day. I mean, I'll be 77 next month. I don't have a very good memory, but that's with me.
but that's stuck in there. And then is it
That's stuck.
still as real as the day it happened? Like, can you see all the details? Do
Yeah.
you ever have something I was listening? I would give me nightmares. Do you have nightmares from that experience? Do you ever think back about it?
Almost every single night before I go to sleep, I think about that, and I pray that I don't. It's just, it's hard. Just talking about it.
Yeah, it seems like you would get PTSD. You could get PTSD from that.
Yes, my I went to a therapist about, I don't know, 2 years after the experience. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I thought maybe if I write it out, and that's when I started writing things. I would just write it out and I'd put it in a drawer. And I thought if I can just get this out of my mind. And she was the first person I was able to actually that would sit down and listen. I was paying her, and she's taking notes. And I said, so what do we do? And she says, well, honey, I'm sorry, I got to put PTSD on your chart. And I said, okay, that was it. That was the advice I got. Oh, great. Now I got a label. I'm a loony. Oh, great. But yeah, it is PTSD. You don't get over it. And, even the people that have positive NDEs have PTSD because when you're in that bliss and that beauty and that home, heaven is home. And when you get out of there, you are so freaking homesick. It doesn't go away. So they even have PTSD. But then you throw in the 3 out of 10 of us that, approximately have the distressing on top of it. We're a mess.
How did your NDE change you?
I think I had to really look at my religion. I'll tell you. I thought, wait a minute, something's wrong with this picture. So when I would go to church, and I did for a while, I would say, oh, I can't say that prayer because I don't believe that Jesus is sitting at the right hand of the Father. Didn't see a throne. I couldn't say I believe in the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world. No, spoiler alert, there's no bodies in heaven. And nobody's rotting in a grave waiting for the last day, the last judgment. And B, there's no judgment. I couldn't say the prayers. So I'll still go with my mom. She's 96 when I go down to visit her. And me and God just sit there and kind of chuckle.
Yeah, I always
I'm not trying to change anybody. I mean, everybody's their own religions and feelings are what they chose to come down. And it's not my job to dispel that. But if there's people out there that like me kind of going, I'm having a little trouble wrapping my mind, or, there's a lot of that deconstruction, religious deconstruction going on now. So those people are looking for answers. And I can just give my experience and whatever they take from it, if it's helpful, great. But if you're really, entrenched and enjoy with your religion, the only caveat I would say is it's a real clue if your religion is saying if you don't believe in X like we do, you're going to hell. Anybody that says you're going to hell because you don't believe what I believe is wrong, because there is no God-made hell, and you're just encouraging people to manifest their own.
What I always took from it or religion is, you know, God says, or in the Bible, God is love. And if
Right.
God is love, then God can't have a torture basement the way you know, like
Exactly.
it just can't,
Bingo.
it's impossible.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in the Bible, I mean, my two favorite are the prodigal son. The kid did everything to piss his dad off, and what happens? The dad runs down the road, gives him a hug, and his son says, I don't want to hear it. I love you. Come on in." That one, and the one, the Good Samaritan. You just,
Exactly.
those are the only two that I can relate to anymore.
I'm right there with you. Just to change, I heard this in another interview that you did, and I thought it was a really good story. But you got an email from your dad after he passed. Can I hear that story?
Cool. Yeah. Now that you're back, you've got like this really thin veil now. The spirits are. My dad talks to me all the time. We were very close, and he was the first atheist in our family, and he was the first Catholic, and he had an experience in World War II where his plane was shot down, and he was crashed upside down, and he said to God, "If you can get me out of this mess, I'll become a Catholic." Well, the all of a sudden the plane lifted, and they got him out of there. So he was always open to what happened to me, and we were very close. So after he died, I had told him before that people come for you. I mean, you don't go to heaven, you don't die by yourself. There's always one or two or three or more people waiting, and they're usually up in the corners at the top of the room. This is the first place you see them. I said, somebody's going to come get you. So when he was dying, he died of COVID. He died at home with my sister and mom there, and he was kind of struggling with his oxygen. And all of a sudden, his eyes flew to the corner of the room. He got this huge smile on his face, and he closed his eyes and left. So my mom and I, a couple of months later, she's got dementia. We were talking about something, and I was saying that my name was Mary Kathleen. She says, "No, it's not." And I said, "Oh, yes, it is. I would never name you that. Mary was your dad's mother, and I didn't like her. And I said, "It's Mary Kathleen. Dad named me Mary, and you got to name me Kathleen to call me Kathy." She says, "No, you're wrong." So 2 days later, Dad's been gone for several months, and I'm looking at it. I got an email for him, and it says, "To Mary." Now my email address is Kathy McDaniel. And I thought, what? And I opened it up, and if somebody had him just printed Mary. He named me Mary, and he wanted to get the last word in from my mother, and it's on the wall. So, I mean, even if somebody must have hacked him, but why would they send that message?
Right.
He also has this thing that he does with my mom and I. Mom tends to go on a little bit long on the phone, and I call her every night. So it got to be that when it got to be a half an hour, the phone would just hang up for months. It didn't matter if we were on a cell phone, a house phone, and we decided. Dad was saying, "Okay, Kathy needs to get back to her life now, Mom. She'll talk to you tomorrow." And he just hangs up. And Mom bought it too. She said, "Oh, well, your dad's going to hang up any second now. I better say goodnight." He's with
Wow.
me all the time.
You kind of alluded to this already, but just to say it more, I guess, succinctly, what is the purpose of life? What's the point? Why are we here?
We're here to learn. We choose our lives. I can't imagine being bored in heaven, but I guess it's kind of like, why do people like to go to scary movies, or why do people like to play games where they're killing aliens or something? Earth is supposed to be the planet of the lowest density. Only the brave souls come here, and they come here to live in this kind of world. Like, somebody asked me, why would somebody choose to come down and be in a Korean prison camp? I don't know. Ask him when you get home. For some reason, people do. And for me, it changed me because I had gotten into the thing of being a victim. Shit kept happening in my lives. And I'd say, "God, why are you doing this to me? I pray and all this, and you keep doing this stuff to me." Now I don't do that. I say, "Gee, Kath, what did you planned that. There must be a reason." Now sit down, take a couple deep breaths, and let's think about it. So no more victimhood. That's very much a positive thing. And you know it's all going to work out okay. I don't care how bad the situation looks. You've you've figured out a way to learn something, and that's the point. So it changes the whole way I look at it. It really
Well,
does. I can't wait to go home. You're not afraid of death, anymore. You look forward to going home.
yeah. Well, you keep doing that. I keep having a question in my mind that I'm going to ask you next, and you just answer it. Because my next question was going to be, "Are you afraid of death?" So, no.
No, for a long time I was, because I thought,
Right.
shoot, I might, flop back into purgatory again, because I still was believing that I deserved it. And so once I figured out that no, that's my purpose, I could let that go and know that when I open my eyes this time, I'm going to straight shot it.
So I know you have your book. Where can people find that book?
It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any place you want to go. It's Misfit in Hell to Heaven Expat. It's a memoir, and you can tell I've got a sense of humor. My family were crazy people. They're all fun and crazy people. So it's not a depressing book. The hell thing is in great detail, but it's just a few chapters, and then how I came to understand what that was about and suggestions for people. It's really uplifting.
Hey, thank you for watching. If you want to know what video to watch next, I would suggest this one. This seems like a really good video for you to watch right now. Yeah, that seems like a good one. Oh, you could subscribe. You could do that too. Subscribe or watch this video. Up to you. Bye-bye.